Today we've got some good news about one of the worst voter suppression bills in the country, and I interview Beto O'Rourke about the moves being made to fix the problems from 2020 when certain Texas counties actually swung to the right, and whether a run for governor is in the works. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're listening to No Lie. So last week we spoke about Texas's voter suppression bill, SB 7, and I interviewed a member of the Texas State House, James Tallarico, and I want to give you an update about that because the last thing we left off on was James basically saying that while he was proud that he and his colleagues were able to stave off this bill for now, that it's unlikely they'd be able to kill this bill entirely if Republicans bring it up again in a special session promised by Governor Abbott. But then he said this.
Well, thanks to people like you, we are getting a national spotlight on Texas. Everyone in the country is talking about SB 7 and the Republicans' attempts to really destroy representative democracy as we know it. And that kind of spotlight, that kind of attention, I think will force Republicans back to the negotiating table. And hopefully, I do think we're going to pass some type of voter suppression bill, but as Texas Democrats, our goal is to limit the damage that this bill will do to our democratic system. But in particular, the damage it can do to vulnerable communities across our state, in particular our Black and Brown communities. So I'm hopeful that this renewed attention, this controversy that has kind of spread across the nation, across the world, will allow us to negotiate a much better version of this bill in the special session.
That the spotlight in and of itself was the goal. And that was validated when Republicans almost instantly backed off from the 1 p.m. Sunday voting ban, all of a sudden claiming that it was a typo and they meant to write 11 a.m. Even though I'm not sure how you can accidentally get the numbers wrong and accidentally write p.m. instead of a.m. Also, the small issue of the fact that they literally defended that time while debating the bill, meaning that it was never a typo, but even they knew that it was indefensible enough that they had to drop it, and so they did. And then, after that, even better news, one of the single most dangerous parts of any bill, Republicans dropped another provision that would allow judges in Texas to void an election, even if there were only thin allegations of fraud. In other words, Republicans wouldn't even have to prove fraud to have an election be overturned. A provision so egregious that no Republican would even admit to putting it in the bill. It wasn't in the House version, it wasn't in the Senate version, it was added in some last-ditch effort, and now, on top of all of that, one of the sponsors of the bill, SB 7, is actually calling that provision horrendous. This guy, Republican Travis Clardy, said, quote, "There was zero appetite or intent or willingness to create some low bar where a single judge can overturn the results of an election. That would be horrendous policy, and it would never be healthy for the democracy." Yeah, it wouldn't. And if it weren't for Texas Democrats literally walking off the floor, that would be the law. Like, imagine an arsonist who just doused a building in gasoline, still holding the gasoline can saying, yeah, setting that building on fire would have been really bad for this neighborhood's well-being. Yeah, Travis, you're right. Great observation. And all of this happened in the last week. So who's to say what other typos they'll find? Who's to say what other horrendous provisions they'll scrap? And so the point of this is to show you how it might feel like a lot of doom and gloom and us just screaming into the ether, but this pressure works. And if it wasn't for the fact that everyone knew what was happening in Texas, we'd still have that provision limiting Sunday voting. We'd still have that provision allowing a single judge to undo the election results. And look, that's not to say that SB 7 is a sure thing, because it's not. But at the very least, if it does pass, it's a hell of a lot less horrific than it was before. And that's owed in part to the fact that people are paying attention. So I get that there's a lot of bad news, but there are wins in here too, and we should take them where we can get them. I've been saying for weeks that SB 7 is the most dangerous voter suppression bill in the country. And now, the most dangerous parts of the most dangerous bill are gone. That's a win, and it's something we should be proud of. Now, one last note before I sign off, and that's that you should check out my interview with Beto O'Rourke. But in it, I announced that Powered by People will officially be part of the Don't Be a Mitch Fund. Powered by People is doing amazing work in Texas, registering new voters, and they understand the importance of doing that now, laying that foundation now, as opposed to waiting 5 minutes before an election and expecting a different result. So with that said, I really want to be able to show Beto and the folks in Texas how much of a punch we can pack. So if you haven't yet donated, please consider donating. So far, we've raised almost $300,000 in just over a month. That is beyond anything I could have ever imagined. But these organizations, including Powered by People, are already working hard. They're already doing their part. They're knocking on doors, they're phone banking and text banking, they're contacting voters, and they're getting them registered. So even if you're not out there volunteering, you can help support the people who are. So please, if you plan on donating in the 2022 midterm cycle anyway, your money will go the furthest by donating now. The link to the Don't Be a Mitch Fund is in the post description and also on my website at briantylercohen.com. Okay, that's it for this episode. Talk to you next week.